Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God. Mr. Gary, in my life, I have been very fortunate to not have to deal with a lot of pain and suffering. I've been very well blessed in life, and God has given me a great family, a loving wife, three amazing children. But at times in life, we suffer. We all suffer. And that creates a lot of questions in people's mind because they just start to feel like they're the only one. They start to feel like that, everything's just falling in around them. So from a biblical perspective, why do we suffer?
That's a good question, and it's important because, as you say, there are people who it seems like when the back door falls in and they just about get it fixed, the front door falls in.
That's right.
And that's obviously not the whole point, but the point is they go from one problem to another problem and they begin to wonder. In fact, W.T. Hamilton years ago wrote a book that actually has a biblical quote for the title, "Why Has All This Happened to Us?" And it's a good question, and the answer is multifaceted, actually. For example, sometimes we suffer simply because of ignorance. You think about Genesis chapter 37, you think about the brothers of Joseph. They deceived their dad. He didn't know Joseph wasn't dead.
Right.
And interesting enough, they didn't say he was. They just
It's kind of alluded to it a little bit.
They led him to the conclusion that he was. And from that time forward, he was in agony. He grieved for it. So his suffering was because he was ignorant of the truth. He just did not know. Sometimes I have suffered for the same reason. Now, not as I recall anyway, anybody deceiving me, but maybe I didn't know that the electricity was still on that thing that I'm going to touch,
right,
or whatever, as an example. So ignorance is one reason for suffering. Another reason is natural disaster. And if you go to the book of Job, Job loses his children to a great wind.
He does.
Well, could that have been a tornado or a hurricane or something like that? Are there people that die in tornadoes and hurricanes? And so natural disaster sometimes brings suffering. Sometimes suffering is actually the consequence of other people's sins. And you think about the children of Israel, and I know, generally speaking, we zero in on the ones that end up dying in the wilderness, but when you think about it, their children had to go through the wilderness too.
Right, they did. And they had to see their parents be lost,
Yeah.
And so,
they had to see that death. So, you get to, Numbers 14, and, God says, okay, you've accused me or said to me, why didn't you just let us die in the wilderness? Basically, he says that can be arranged.
Right.
And they die, but the children have to go through all of that. Now, I do want to notice Ezekiel chapter 18, because Ezekiel is told by God a very, very important point, and that is verse 20, the soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So I might suffer as a consequence of somebody else's sin, like the guy gets drunk,
right,
and he hits me in a car, and I'm injured terribly. Well, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hell for it.
Right.
It just means I'm suffering because this other guy did something wrong. And that happens over and over again. We also live in a world of law and order. The law of gravity. I've known people that fell off the second story of a two-story building, and it tore them up pretty good. Did they suffer? I have very little doubt about that. Sure they did, but we live in a world of law and order. You think about Eutychus.
Right.
We usually think about, we make jokes kind of or laugh about that because, of course, we can't work miracles and things like that. But But Eutychus died because he fell asleep in the upper story window and fell to the ground. And I don't know, broke his neck. I don't know, what happened, but I know he died. That I do know. And so the world of law and order brought that about. Sometimes you can go a step further and you can say, in reference to all of us, that we suffer because of the sinful actions of other people. I'm not talking about the consequences,
Right.
which we already dealt with. I'm talking about, like, Abel. What did Abel do wrong?
Nothing.
Not a thing. But he suffered because his brother got angry, lost control of it, and killed him.
Right.
So why do we suffer? The answer really is multiple.
Right.
It'll vary, and I probably hadn't covered near all of them, but these are some of the reasons, and maybe that helps us a little bit.
Well, I think it does, and sometimes we suffer because of the consequences of even our own sins,
We do.
of things that we do. But I think the important thing to realize is that all people suffer, whether you're living a righteous life or you're living a terrible life. All people are going to go through some type of suffering. And the great thing about it is as Christians, we can know that when this life is over, when the physical suffering of this life is over, that we have an eternity of peace laying before us, but we must live righteous lives before Him. And if we do that, then we can be sure of that eternal peace for all of our days.